Ladies and gentlemen, it's time! Brought to you by Ringside, the best in boxing. It's the Zapata Brand Boxing Podcast. Introducing first, fighting out of the Zapata Brand Studio in Berwick, Pennsylvania. He is an expert in boxing and bagels, George Zapata!
Hey guys, welcome to the Zapata Brand Boxing Podcast, brought to you by Ringside. Go to ringside.com/podcast, and you too could get 40% off selected brands. And this week, big fight week, April 20th, 2024, 8 p.m. on ppv.com. Devin Haney, Ryan Garcia, scheduled to fight. And in that live chat on ppv.com is my next guest. He is the voice of my youth and many others. Jim Lampley joins me on the Zapata Brand Boxing Podcast. Jim, how are you again?
I'm doing fine, George. How are you?
Good. And happy belated birthday. We'll get that out of the way first.
Thank you very much. A few days ago, I reached a very large and, sort of round number. It's not a round, it's a 5 number. But at any rate, it's been a week of hectic birthday acknowledgement, and I'm glad that it will soon be over and we can go back to normal life. Thank you very much for the birthday wish. I appreciate it. And I appreciate all the birthday wishes I've gotten from all around the boxing world. It's been a tremendously thrilling and heartwarming week, to have some of the most famous fighters of all time sending me video messages to wish me a happy birthday. It's just made me feel more privileged and blessed than ever from my experience of 30 years covering boxing matches.
Well, we've been blessed to have you for 30 years, and I can tell you from experience, the memories you've given us have been monumental in my life, and I'm sure others as well. So, Jim, let me rewind a little bit. Last time we talked, it was right before the Tszyu Fundora fight. It was a little bit hectic that week. A late replacement, he goes in. What was your initial reaction to the pay-per-view itself?
Well, obviously, it turned out to be a more significant and memorable event than anyone anticipated in a very perverse way. And a part of the whole live chat idea is that, along with Lance Pugmire, Kevin Ioli, whoever else is working with me on that particular evening's live chat, Chris Algieri, Dan Canobio, we now have a burgeoning cast on ppv.com, and that's great. But I was in that position for a strange moment, and I had a strange connection to the moment because when I was a kid, about 4 years old, my older brother was carrying me on his shoulders down a street in Hendersonville, North Carolina. The street was being paved. There were large rocks on either side of it, and he dropped me headfirst onto a rock and wound up bringing me home to my house in Hendersonville, crying and screaming, "Jimbo's going to die, Jimbo's going to die." And the reason was that he had blood all over his shirt and all over his pants because the place where I was cut was right there, inside the hairline on the top of the skull. My uncle was the doctor who treated me, and I can still remember that day and his voice telling my mother, "No, he's not going to die. Yes, there's a lot of blood, but that's because the top of the skull is the location of the most concentrated convergence of blood vessels anywhere in the body. If you think about it, the brain needs blood." So instantly upon seeing that cut on Tszyu, where the cut was located, how the cut had been caused by a sharp elbow blow, I realized from my childhood experience, they're not going to be able to stop this blood. This is not a blood flow that can be brought to heal by all of the normal cut man methods. This is something that's going to create a bloodbath. And it literally did create a bloodbath in the ring and turned the boxing match into a very strange event, which now will reverberate for months to come as promoters and governing bodies try to figure out how to provide the right just outcome to what took place last Saturday night. It's not Fundora's fault in any way, shape, or form that he accidentally brought his elbow down on the top of Tszyu's head. It's not a fight that Tszyu should be seen to have lost, because I believe that judges probably instinctively and psychologically understandably scored the blood, and they never should have scored the blood, because the blood wasn't caused by a punch. It was caused by an accidental foul. So all those things conspired to create this unusual blood pageant that will linger in people's memories for a long time, because I don't know when I've seen two fighters covered with that much blood in the ring. I've seen it, but not exactly like that. And again, that's because of the convergence of blood vessels on the top of the skull.
Okay, that being said, one quick point on that. Let's just, for argument's sake, you're in the corner. You stop that fight after 2 just because it would be a no contest at that point. Because he was a human windshield.
I don't understand how there was no contest stoppage, which would bring an immediate halt to the travesty that was taking place and set the stage for the next part of the process, which is, how do we create a logical rematch and give both Tszyu and Fundora a chance to perform under normal rather than abnormal circumstances? I don't really understand why and how that didn't happen, but it didn't happen. And now it's in the lap of the governing body to try to figure out how to reel this back in and create some form of justice for Tszyu and for Fundora, who isn't going to get full credit for a win in the fight until the factor of the extreme blood flow has been brought into focus and properly responded to.
Right. I don't think Fundora gets the closure, or the fans get the closure that they needed. And they did say that there was a verbal rematch clause in place, but in boxing, you and I know, a verbal agreement really doesn't mean anything.
It's not worth the paper on which it's written.
No, not at all. Well, let's fast forward to this Saturday, April 20th on ppv.com, 8 o'clock. You in a live chat with Lance Pugmire, Chris Algieri, and Dan Kenobi. Devin Haney versus Ryan Garcia. We finally made it. A month ago, I would have said we wouldn't have made it here, but we kind of dragged Ryan across the finish line. I do believe he'll get in the ring. Are you surprised we got here?
No, money talks, and it always has in boxing matchmaking. And this is a logical fight. I didn't realize until we began building up to this that they fought 6 times as amateurs. So there's a more than faint resemblance here to Oscar De La Hoya versus Shane Mosley. Oscar is Ryan's promoter, so it makes all the sense in the world that this should be taking place. Haney has had a terrific run over the course of the past couple of years, has beaten quite a number of big name value, very good fighters, up to and including Vasily Lomachenko, the fighter I think of as the premier boxing craftsman of the past 20, 25 years. His win over Lomachenko creates a brand of legitimacy that's pretty rare in boxing these days. So he's got the right to put that on the line in a position where he can make the most possible money. And in the world of social media, Ryan Garcia is the opponent against whom he can make the most possible money, or at least that would appear to be the case.
As we say, it appears to be the case that would be the most lucrative financially. However, ticket sales are slow. Do you think the actions of Ryan Garcia have hindered this promotion?
Well, I don't think the actions of Ryan Garcia have helped the promotion. I don't pay attention to social media, but I pay enough attention to general media to know from what I read about this that people are worried about Ryan, that people are concerned about Ryan's state of mind, or they're saying that by way of using his silliness to diminish him. And it is silliness, by the way, to throw your life out there in the ways in which he has done. I can't blame him. I don't know what I would do if I were his age and had the assets in my life that he has and had the vehicle of social media to employ as a reflex, and it is a reflex for people in his generation. It's not a reflex for people in my generation. I make a very conscious and controlled decision never to employ social media or involve myself in social media, because I think that my life should have certain boundaries and limits. I've made enough mistakes over the years to know that it's not good to trade on your mistakes in public. So I'm not surprised that the fight is taking place. I'm not surprised that they have gotten to this threshold. And I'm not surprised that it's not selling as well in New York as would have been the case in Las Vegas or
Now,
Southern California.
you say you're not surprised it's not selling as good? Do you think it would have not sold that good?
These are two California fighters. Devin Haney was raised and born and raised in, from what I understand, at the San Francisco area. Ryan Garcia is from Victorville. They have separate audiences up to a point within the boxing world, but their audiences can converge on one particular basis, which is that they are two Californians who fought each other 6 times. Why is the fight taking place in Brooklyn? Apparently, from what I read, the fight is taking place in Brooklyn because Canelo Alvarez has May 4 coming up, and the promoter did not want interference with ticket sales and audience interests for the Canelo Alvarez fight to infringe on that economic kickback in any way, and therefore wanted this fight to take place in Brooklyn. And that ultimately is what was agreed to. This is all hearsay for me. I'm not directly involved in any of it. I haven't spoken to either promoter to get their input on that. I probably will before the fight takes place. But for now, I'm just basing what I say on general media, and the general media picture seems to be these two guys are fighting in Brooklyn because that's the way Canelo and his promoter wanted it to be. And I think that that's one of the reasons that they're having trouble selling.
Yeah, the price point too is a little bit high, I think, for the caliber. Not to say that they can't sell. I think at starting at almost $700 for seats, because I looked at the chart because I was actually going to go, but at $700 a seat, and now they've slashed almost in half. That would have been for me. That's a no go at that point, because I'd rather sit at home watching ppv.com and interacting with Jim Lampley, to be quite honest with you. So let me ask you this quick. This fight's over. Let's say Haney wins. Are you leaning towards Devin Haney in this fight?
Yes.
Okay.
I mean that generally speaking, the superior boxer wins this kind of face-to-face confrontation, and I believe all the evidence suggests that he's the superior boxer.
So where does Haney go from here? It doesn't seem like they're able to secure a fight, whether it be with Tank Davis, whether it be with someone in an upper division, maybe at 147. Where does he go from here? He's kind of in a zone where there's a lot of contenders there, but some are on the other side of the street, some are on this side of the street, and they can never get that one fight. Lomachenko's last significant fight, I don't consider a Prograis a fight that was a high level fight for him.
In the current global market for boxing, and this is not an expert opinion on my part, this is conjecture. But in the current global market for boxing, I think where Haney goes from here is to a larger and perhaps more colorful social media presence, so that he can build his social media audience up in such a way as to create interest for fights which are in too many cases going to be seen as one-sided in favor of his boxing skill. Floyd Mayweather dealt with this his entire career. If your fights are seen as one-sided in favor of your boxing skill, then that suggests to a lot of people in the audience, well, there aren't going to be fireworks. This is not going to be some kind of a firefight. This is going to be a tactical exercise in which the superior boxer carefully manages his way to a tactical victory. It's a unanimous decision. It's a 116 to 112 or 117 to 110 type unanimous decision. It's not going to be all that overwhelmingly entertaining for me. I know who wins. I'll read about it the next day. I think to a certain degree, that's the position in which Haney finds himself. Ryan Garcia's position is entirely different. I think he's the underdog in the fight. I think if he somehow wins by landing one big left hook, for instance, one possible way to do it, then there's an explosion of interest from his social media audience, which could lead to big money for a rematch or whatever else comes next. But an easy victory for Haney, which I think is quite possible, leads down the road toward the Mayweather problem. And Mayweather solved that problem with social media. Mayweather expanded his audience on non-boxing issues and created a basis for emotional interest in his fights on non-boxing issues by being a genius in the employment of social media. And I believe that would be the direction in which Haney would have to go in the future.
You know, it's funny you bring that up because I just talked to George Dokovic, he's a friend of mine, and the one thing that Mayweather did was put that 24/7 into the 24/7 HBO Sports thing in the forefront. So you got that crossover media, which really propelled him right after the Arturo Gatti fight, and he fought De La Hoya with that 24/7. I think Devin Haney, if to cross over to that side, you know, he went on Mayweather went on Dancing with the Stars and what have you, really propelled him to it. That is why it is very important to have the backstories that you guys told prior to all the fights. That's the only way you can make a star.
Well, Floyd Mayweather, love him or hate him, was a general media genius and a social media genius. And he used both of those skills to build and promote his audience and to essentially create the largest economic event in the history of the sport, Mayweather versus Pacquiao. You know, Pacquiao was the perfect foil for everything that Floyd wanted and needed to market. And that, you know, created this giant extravaganza. Haney doesn't have that person unless somehow or another Ryan Garcia turns out to be that person. And there's nothing in Ryan Garcia's portfolio so far that suggests to us that he's as meaningful a boxing figure as Manny Pacquiao was.
Well, one last thing before I wrap up. Jim, are you going to the fight in Brooklyn?
Yes.
Will you be there?
I will be right there in Barclays Center.
Do you go to the fighter meetings prior to that or not?
I do not go to the fighter meetings prior to that, no.
Okay, so let me ask you from your experience.
Because those are for broadcasters, and I'm not invited to be a part of any broadcast. I'm doing this on ppv.com.
Okay, so have you ever, in your 30 years there on doing the fighter meetings and what have you ever gone into a fighter meeting with one expectation of how the fight would come out, and then when you went and had that actual one-on-one contact with them, say, this is not going to end good for this guy, and exactly what happened is that?
Well, not only have I had that experience, and I don't know that I could pull 5 or 6 out of the bag right now and specify to you when those experiences took place, but not only have I had that experience, but in the years when I was calling fights, 31 years from 1987 to the end of 2018, I overwhelmingly often would have friends come to me and say, who's going to win? How are they going to win? How should I bet, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I always said to them, based on what you just described, the quote fighter meetings, I always said to them, I can't answer that question until less than 24 hours before the fight. When I have had a chance to sit across the table from these two guys and look them in the eye and see how they talk and listen to how they talk about this confrontation, then I can probably give you a fairly self-assured expectation as to what's going to happen in the fight. But I've seen too many situations in which my on-paper evaluation turned out to be wrong to try to tell you that without having had the sit-down, face-to-face conversation with both fighters that leads to a keener understanding. You got to see their body language. You got to see the way they say what they say. And only then do you understand the psychological element of how both fighters are going into the fight.
Well, Jim, I'm going to have to wrap that up. But hey, let me tell you, you are a plethora of knowledge. You are a joy to talk to. And again, being the voice of my youth, it's amazing that I get a chance to do this. So what they can do, though, if they want to interact with you, go to ppv.com this Saturday night. See Devin Haney take on Ryan Garcia, and you will be in the chat with Dan Kenobi, with Lance Pugmire, and Chris Algieri. You'll be co-hosting it all. You'll answer all the questions that they need to answer, and it's an easy way to get the pay-per-view. You don't have to have a subscription. Payperview.com. Go there, enjoy the fights this Saturday night. Jim, as always, thanks for joining us before the big fights.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it, George.
Anytime.
Thanks for watching the Zapata Brand Podcast. Please subscribe to the podcast and listen where all podcasts are available.